And here we are. Hello everybody, welcome to this Sunday afternoon of streaming. In this live stream episode we're gonna cover AQUAMARINE4 by Acustica Audio. It's been quite a streak of events with Acustica, and I gotta say, this is not because I'm friend with the company, I like what the company's doing and what's, their credo and blah, blah, blah. It's mostly because of you people and the community that's really receiving everything like at the warmest of extents, to the warmest of extents, I would say, really. You've been super friendly, you've been super motivated to watch the streams, and there's an endless flow of questions and messages that I'm getting also through Messenger, which I didn't have installed days ago. So when I installed it, I found like a stream of messages that I hadn't replied to, and that made me look very unpolite. So sorry about that. We are at 99 followers on Twitch, which is a landmark for me. We're one short to get to 100. I don't usually keep count of these, but it's always fun when you're capable of doing something that's completely off trend. I like to play video games, but I'm not here on Twitch to play them, and it's always fun when you see that there's a public, there's an audience that's receiving everything I'm doing, finding it interesting, getting motivated, because ultimately that's what we're doing. So we just reached 100 followers. I don't know who did it, but I saw you here. 8 minutes 30 seconds, people. Bam, we reached 100. Live on stream, makes me feel like one of those super big shots are probably getting paid millions of euros to make their own, own matches on video games and stuff, which I absolutely love, and sometimes I even watch. So I have friends that are into the competitive gaming, and I know the business is kind of very different than from what's happening in the music business. So without further ado, which is another sentence you always hear in tutorials, so gotta throw it out there. We're here to talk about AQUAMARINE4. Beautiful name for a plugin suite. I also like the gem itself. I gotta say, like, I'm not an expert, but I'm kind of fond of that colors and stuff. And it's a simple suite in a way, because it's just two plugins, one being an EQ and one being a compressor. We're mostly here, however, for the compressor, because yesterday a student of mine, Christian, I don't know if you're watching these from the future or not, suggested that he needed some help. Like, he had heard about it, he obviously said, I cannot buy the original hardware, it's too expensive. He mixes everything in the box, starting off as a techno EDM producer, and he said, like, what do you think about the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor? Because there's plugins out there, supposedly official plugins endorsed by Shadow Hills Industries, which is a beautiful name. I really love how the thing looks and how the whole company kind of looks like. It makes it very mysterious in a way, right? So this was a question he had, and I was like, honestly replied to him, like, I don't use the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor, but I did have a story. So I built this bigger frame, with bubbles and stuff around me, so that it's gonna be more entertaining for you to listen to the stories when, before we go to the mixing, or whenever I go back to telling you about it. So I do not kind of like the mastering compressor that Shadow Hills make. I found it beautiful, looks beautiful, sounds fantastic in its own way. It's a great design as well. So nothing wrong about that. It's just not clicking with what I do. And the original hardware I had for, I think, around 6 months or 8, some years ago, when we were looking to sort of like acquire a new analog piece of equipment for that year. Usually every year we thought about something we would add, and we thought about we could buy a mastering compressor. So the distributor was nice enough to send me a Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor with a PSU, which, trust me, is a whole another unit in itself. It's massive. Even the PSU is just huge. And I don't know which kind of revision I had. I don't know whether it was an older version or a newer version. It sounded fantastic, but ultimately we did send it back. So I don't have a Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor around here. I would love to, because, as I said, it looks beautiful. Even when it's off, it's beautiful. But my first experience with the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor happened, I think, in Milano. And I think it was around 2008, 8 or 9, I don't remember anymore, but I was writing some keyboard tracks for a project that one of my teachers at the time had moved me onto, not as a sub, but something, like a word of mouth kind of thing. And we went to the studio and there was a mastering compressor right there. And I remember we kind of had a lot of fun with it because I was jumping in between sound engineering and keyboards playing and teaching piano and that stuff. And I was there as a keyboards player, just brought tracks and we were just talking with the engineer. But we were making fun of the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor because it's a device that when the mixing engineer wants to use it, a lot of people, the world goes in slow motion and everybody goes like, no, like don't touch that because it's going to ruin the mix. Why is that? That's not because the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor is wrong, but that came off as a joke because I told him that every time I had fiddled with it in fairs, in other studios in LA, it was just for fun, absolutely for fun. I couldn't get anything to sound that much better than it was already, and I felt the compression was always overwhelming in a way. It sounded great, it just didn't take the record, the program material I had, to a point where it sounded the way I want it. And that has to do with how I mix, how I produce stuff. It's a workflow thing. So for a lot of other people, it works. But I usually would dial it in and then come off, backing off until I basically had zero compression, which is perfectly legit if you want to do it that way. And at that point, I was like, wow, okay, now it sounds fantastic. But the needle wasn't even moving. It was just passing through the transformers and it sounded great. So for me, it's always been kind of a kryptonite kind of thing, I don't know. It was kind of like that. So when I was asked to cover this, talking about the plugins themselves, I've got to say that with AQUAMARINE, the compressor, which is this dude here, I was kind of like, all right, let's try it out. Let's help my student out and let's find out whether it works or not. There's another famous incarnation of this, which is made by other brands and stuff. And I've tried it. And I gotta say, between the two, I don't like either of the two, which is great because it means that they're both kind of sort of faithful representations of those units. But the one I dislike the most is probably the one by Acustica. And this is a good thing, because if I dislike these more than the other, it means that this thing is actually getting to things to sound more authentic than the other one. I kind of think that this has the features that I remembered, and I'm gonna guide you through how to understand this compressor step by step, and then we're gonna talk about how I like to operate this thing, because it's maybe a peculiar thing, but there's a couple ways to do it, and we gotta be careful because there's an interaction between the parts. The first thing we're gonna do, however, is not the compressor. The first thing we're gonna cover is the EQ, because the EQ, there's just nothing wrong with it. It's just beautiful. It's inspired by a Langevin 258A. And for those of you who don't know this unit, it's a Pultec inspired EQ with sort of different cuts and frequency selection. So you get a 40 and 100, and then you get a 3K, 5K, 10K, 15. I think the low frequency is a Bell. Somehow the curves are different than a Pultec, and I think the high frequency is a Shelf. Don't quote me on that. I don't know. I only know you have so few knobs that it's kind of very hard to be wrong. So the plugin that Acustica modeled has an input trim, does not have an output trim, has a preamp selector that we will also find in the compressor. You have P1A, bronze, silver, gold, and LGV. I gotta say that P1A should be a Pultec inspired preamplifier. Bronze, silver, and gold are taken from the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor, respectively. They should be iron, nickel, and steel, something like that. But there's three sort of like transformer selections that kind of give you different tonalities, And LGV should be a mono unit from some other preamplifier. Don't kind of remember, but the P1A and LGV are different than what you would expect from sort of a Shadow Hills Industries unit. However, this, again, is a Langevin thing. So Acustica is once again reinterpreting some of the elements and making them their own, which I think is very cool because, you know, one-to-one copies are so-so. You know, get the analog if you really want to have it. However, how does it work? You select your low frequency, you add or attenuate. You select your high frequency, you add or attenuate. It's this simple and this beautiful. Now, the best song I can use to showcase this is a tune we did maybe more. We actually did maybe 5 years ago or something with the band from France called Sway. And we did the record in like a week. We recorded and mixed it. The band left, the label came on the first day, listened to it, they were extremely happy, and I sent them the mixes after having bounced them to a 102. We actually had a tape machine in the studio for I think a couple weeks. A friend that restores them and renovates them brought it there. We ended up liking a version that was quite dark. And we're gonna use the Langevin the way the Pultecs were used in the mastering phase. So in the real master you're gonna hear on Spotify, we used Pultecs, real Pultecs, but the principle is kind of the same. The beauty of the Langevin, and I think this plugin that is inspired from them, is that you don't have tubes. You have original Marinaire transformers, which are the most sought after transformer in AMS Neve land. So they take those in common with the famous Neve preamps, and these obviously have a role in the sound. But the fact that there's no tube, and I think the rectifier in the Pultec is a tube, but here, you know, it's just a MOSFET, I think, makes the unit a lot more stable and reliable in a way. So you lose the magic of the Pultec, the way the Pultecs like to go everywhere sometimes. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but you get the more focused kind of sound of some more modern, I would say, solid state, you know, approach. So let's listen to this track on its own as it was printed when the band and the label signed it off. And look, I also have a spectrometer, so you can take a look at it and you listen to it, but also look at it because there's, you know, it looks particular. So actually I'm gonna start from the intro. How cool is that? They never do that. Right, I'll stop it here because it's plenty enough for my example. Beautiful band, I just love their songs. We had so much fun, but it was so intense because in 1 week we did everything. It was an EP, entire EP, I think it was 5 songs, recorded and mixed in 1 week. It was quite a thing, but the band played it together, you know, keyboards, guitars, bass, drums, vocals, backing vocals, quite a lot of stuff. What I noticed when I opened the mix that they signed off was like, this is really dark. Like, I wouldn't say dark, the detail is there, but it's really, really shaved off on the 10K. So that's part of why when we employed Pultecs in the master, we kind of bounced it a little bit more than one would do with the high frequencies. Now, this part is super cool for checking what I mean by dark. Now, let's try the Langevin the way I've set it up. I'm gonna turn it on at, in between the guitar part. There's a lot of mid frequencies. There's a lot of highs in the mix as well. They're just not that prominent and modern in a way. Hear out what the AQUAMARINE 4 EQ can do just with a simple, it's a plus 10, which I don't think it's 10 dBs at 15K, and a little bit of a bump at 40 Hertz. So when the orange is engaged, this is the bypass in Studio One, and then in, and you're gonna hear it. That's all you need to be sold on this EQ. Trust me, this was the thing when we used the Pultex that just worked out. Like, it's a 15K thing, and I had it at 10. I kind of dialed it in at around 9. I think it's like right there. The bump, obviously, from original to equalized is quite intense. I don't even need to use preamp. I don't need to use anything else. It's just this simple. And also the 40 Hertz bump helps the kick come out and rebalance the thing. And it sounds produced already. That's a term that I usually like to use. And it's quite dramatic, but it's so musical. And I gotta say, maybe if we had the Langevins in studio, which we didn't, we could have gotten around better with the fact that the Pultex kind of like to, as I said, go a little bit everywhere. So the lows aren't as tight as this, but on the Pultex they're a little more bloomy. So you probably have two in plugins world, so it's good to know. Let's just copy this preset, take the chorus, and experiment with a couple more settings, just so that you can hear what these plugins sounds like in all of these frequencies, especially the 100 versus 40, and then we're gonna tour around the different high frequencies. While I work the low frequencies, I'm not gonna touch the highs. I just wanna let you hear what the 100 does in relationship with how much we lifted here, all right? I gotta say 100 might even be a better choice just because it reconnects with the bass and the lows of the guitars. We would need to have sort of like a client or the engineer here and say what do we want to do, because a 40 is a much more clinical approach to getting just the extreme lows and makes it sound kind of more expensive as a record, but the 100 just carries so much energy. And you don't have the 60 or the 70 which you have on some types of Pultex, but do you need them? I think not, because 40 and 100 are already the two typical ways of sounding. What you would probably do on a Pultex when you go 60, 100, that's usually that. Some people like to go 30 sometimes for super extreme, subtle feel of energy in the lows. This one obviously cannot do the 20, 30 trick, but it's so musical. So now let's keep 100, which I really liked, and let's tour the highs. I gotta say, even the 5K I'm a fan of. The 10K kind of sounds like a cheap move to me. I often avoid going 10K on 2 tracks. I don't know, it just has that sound of when you kind of start equalizing stuff just for fun, and it always feels like a cheap trick. Like there's always a better solution to the problem than just lifting 10K, but not always, but just generally I try, and I have a preconception probably about 10K. 15 is beautiful. 5 is also fantastic. Maybe it picks up a lot of the mids that don't really need touching. Let's keep this, which I really liked, and let's try and work with the preamps. And that's it. LGV sounds really good on this one. Wow. The P1A I don't particularly like. I think it muffles things up a little bit. Bronze is kind of darker, not darker in a way, but kind of deeper, and I don't need deeper in here. There's already all the tape stuff going on. Silver is typical of rock tunes. I gotta say that it has a sparkle thing without being bloomy, while gold is bloomy with less sparkle. If I had to tell you like that. And this, I remember, used to be exactly what we had on the real unit, on the Shadow Hills. We're gonna find these out in the compressor as well, because this preamp circuitry, I like to say that, but it's a plugin, doesn't have circuitry. I don't know, we gotta ask Giancarlo. Maybe if we turn it around, we're gonna find some components. But the bronze, silver, and gold used to be really like this. Like for singer-songwriter, we would go to the first setting of the Shadow Hills just as a rule. I remember that it kind of sounded fine. Silver was great for a lot of rock and country rock units and songs and genres and subgenres. And gold was kind of when you wanted everything sort of out of the unit, and it had this bloom that worked for things that were a little bit lacking mids, maybe electronic music and that stuff. So I find myself at home with these 3 from my memory of over, I would say, now 3 years ago, when we had it in the studio, when we had the real mastering compressor in the studio. The colors I really loved. I gotta say, that's a unit that if you mix a lot in digital, and you're switching onto sort of an out of the box experience, and you want one thing that really gives you a lot of sound, and you start from a fully digital thing, the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor is a one-stop unit. The problem with it is that it's a one unit. So what I would do if I had a Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor is I would undoubtedly, it's very hard to say that, pair it with an EQ. Even a Baxandal EQ would be necessary, in my opinion. The reason for this is that the way it handles the mid frequencies, to me, made it always a little bit sort of problematic without an EQ. But what mastering compressor doesn't need an EQ before or after? It's always a good match if you find, maybe a colored EQ and a clean compressor, or maybe a colored compressor and a clean EQ. The two things go hand in hand. So now we're gonna move to the compressor, and the compressor is actually a whole different beast for sure. So what we have here is the replica of, I would say, an heavily inspired plugin, let's play it politically correct, from, again, the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor. So the two things you can see right off is the 2 meters at the center, which can display input, output, or opto and discrete. So when you have it in input, output, the left meter is input, the right meter is output. We're gonna play with calibration because we don't trust our eyes. We're gonna find out what this means. Then you have an input trim, that obviously is gonna input offset the whole unit, and it's gonna work when you have preamps on at the bottom here, as you can see. When you switch these to opto discrete, then you see opto compression reduction on the left and discrete gain reduction on the right. The unit marvelously features an output stage that you can use to further offset the whole volume, the whole gain structure. And I think the input trim and output trims make life so much easier on this unit because of the interaction of the two compressors. So the two comps, you have them turned on or off with those nice LEDs, which they're not aquamarine color. It's pretty cool. That's like a honey color. So that's a carve ball by Acustica. So you turn them on with opto on or discrete on, and then they operate. Without them, they're in bypass. The opto side is on the left. So what you have here is generally a threshold from 0 to 24. So you lower the threshold the higher you go in numbers, and then you have a gain which is applied after the compression. Then you have a head which is not present on the real unit that they got inspired from the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor. This ahead is a look ahead function, sort of. So when you put it to 0, you have 0 look ahead. So the transients hit the opto compressor, and then the opto compressor tries to just get the ball, without problems. And sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't happen. But I would sort of say that if I remember correctly, the original unit would be at 0 because there's no look ahead in the digital world. There's no way that they're gonna have the signal be understood from the future to the past. It just makes no sense. If you move to 4, then you have kind of the most look ahead function you can. So the opto compressor is going to get the signal beforehand, I don't know how many milliseconds, and it's just gonna hear what's gonna happen in the future, and maybe it's gonna say like, wow, there's a transient that I can really not compensate without distorting, without artifacts. So it's probably better that I start, cresting the factor way before I would normally, because this is a heavy transient I have ahead. So that depends. What difference does it make? 0, it's a little bit more of a brutal, kind of honest to the unit, I would say, as I remembered. And 4 is more of a cleaner opto stage. No, I wouldn't say digital, but it sounds like it can do everything and it's never too moody in a way, which depends on what you want to do. The discrete area, which is on the opposite side, has threshold again, has gain again, but has a little bit more controls because obviously it's a VCA compressor. So now you can set it with the ratio 1.2, 2, 3, 4, 6, even the values in between, which the original unit does not have, and flood, which is 20 to 1 approximately. Not exactly, I think, but almost there. You have attack from 0.1, 0.5, 1.5, 10, 30, and you have recovery from 0.1 to dual. Dual being auto release. So there's a kind of a dual stage release, and the compressor, the discrete area of the compressor floats, a little bit more in a watery kind of side. Not kind of SSL sounding like, but sort of there, more of an adaptive kind of recovery. The other things I haven't mentioned is that you have the typical SH mod on discrete. So discrete operates with the possibility of changing your crest factor reaction for the attack part. Very technical, I know, but it's there. And trust me, this is going to save your behind because of how the compressor works in this plugin. So if you have never touched Schmod, because some people like to say that, I learned that some of you call it Schmod. So if you have never used and touched SH mod or Schmod, it's perfectly fine. I don't usually fiddle with that too much. I don't have time for that additional knob, I only have time for a couple knobs each plugin. But in this particular compressor, you gotta use it in some cases, and I'm gonna teach you how from my own personal experience. Then last but not least, sidechain, where you can engage an external sidechain. Filter, this is a fixed 90 Hz filter. I think it's a 12 dB per octave. I don't remember, but it should be around 90 Hertz. So you have an internal sidechain and a mix knob. Very useful, not present in the original unit. And I think it's kind of cool to have. So now we mean business. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take sine wave and we're gonna try and see where 0 is, because this 0 to us means nothing. I wanna know the 0 VU, what it translates to in 0 dB FS in this virtual world. So we take a tone generator, we put it here. I know it's horrible, we gotta do it. So how do I spare you this life? Probably like this. All right, nice. So both me and you now, we don't hear this, but we see it on the screen. So we have a 1 kilohertz sine wave at -24. All right, so what is -20? What is -18? Aha, all right. What is -19? Aha, okay. So -18 dBFS, which was kind of to be expected, is 0 VU. So it would make sense that if I go 4 down, which my math says 22, we are here at 4. Awesome. If I go another 4 down, we're at 8. That's fantastic. If I go another 4 down, we're at 12. And as you can imagine, these all match. So we go from -38 to -18. And this is equal for the input and output stage. So if I go here and I put -22, and then I output trim this to 4, then we're reaching back to 0 VU on the output, but not on the input. That's great. What happens if I go here and move it? So this is 4. Now, the manual that I have read says that the preamp has effect, the input trim has an effect only when the preamp is on. This seems to defy the purpose of this. And like it seems to prove that the manual is wrong. What matters, however, yes, as you can see, things are changing here and there. What matters is that to me, it is super important that the input trim works even if the preamp is off. So that's fantastic. I think it should stay this way. Even without the color of the preamplifier, I would still want to have the input trim. So we know this, that's great. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna engage opto, and we're gonna keep our level here, I would say at -18, everything else at 0, and we're gonna try and see what happens if we go to 4 with the opto. Nothing. So we're compressing, but we're not hitting the threshold. So where is -18 on the opto? If it is at 12, it would be awesome, but we're not getting it. Not getting it. Ah, sorry. We're not watching these. All right. Cancel everything. I was metering input and output. So now opto discrete. Let's see where we're hitting 4. There we go. All right. All right. All right. All right. So pretty much when we hit 18, we are, which is cool, 18 -18. So when we're hitting 18, we're having 4 dB of compression on the opto. What if we change the look ahead? Good, nothing changes. It shouldn't, because we're sending a sine wave which has no crest factor, I would say, whatsoever. There's no transient at all. So that's pretty cool. Now let's disengage opto and let's engage discrete. And what we're gonna find out is that, if I remember right, I usually like to keep a 1 millisecond 0.1 just for kicks initially and start off at 2.1 when I do these tests. Now let's find out when the compressor is going to engage. Remember, on the opto, it was 18. Aha. So here, it's around 14. At 2. What if I change it to 1.2? Different threshold level. So this is what I told my student when we tried this. The other plugin that people have, I think, doesn't behave like this. The threshold compensates for the ratio, so when you move the ratio, you're always gonna have at that point the same exact compression reduction, the gain reduction. Here, no. You're moving the ratio, that threshold value does not imply the same gain reduction. So if we wanna have 4, obviously the attack also plays a role. So if we want to put it to 18, which was the same as opto, we have to go 5. So at 2 to 1, 5 milliseconds, let me see the release. The release also changes that, except for the dual. All right. So 5 milliseconds attack, 0.1 recovery, 18 threshold, ratio 2, we're behaving sort of like as much compression as the opto. What does it mean? Nothing at all, meaning that you're gonna use your ears, but you know that when you move the ratio, you move the attack, you even move the recovery, the threshold value does not apply as it used to be. So be prepared to do a lot of retouching. That's what I meant. The opto is much more straightforward. Now, enough with this. Let's get back to hearing stuff. Fantastic. And let's take a song that is not this song for now. Let's take a song that I mastered over 6 years ago, I think, if not 7. This is a band called April Fool's Music. The song is called Winter Sun. It was the single of the EP that I mastered. Beautiful sound, music that spans through different countries, and it's a collective of musicians that are playing together. The main base is in Ireland, I think, and but it has musicians from Switzerland, Brazil, Japan, whatever. It's just great. This song is their single of that EP, and it's an electronic tune that is gonna lend itself perfectly for these compressor tests. So just as usual, I mean, let's listen what we have, because it's not respectful to the artist just to go in between. Let's hear how the song starts and I'll stop it in between. Right? Super cool. I really love this. When I got this project, I said, this is great. We're gonna master it. We're super happy about it. We're gonna use the mastering compressor now and see how much Alberto can ruin the mix. And if it happens to ruin the mix, this plugin is 1-to-1 what the analog unit could do in my hands. So that tells you that it's extremely faithful to the original. But sarcasm apart, let's try out just the opto compressor at first. What I would keep last, honestly, trust me, just, get seated, enjoy the ride, is the preamps. Let's turn discrete off. Let's put it to, everything at 0 as much as I can. And let's engage the compressor on the opto side. Now, the opto side on electronic music can be brutalized. And this is beautiful. You can't do this exactly on the vintage LA2s, LA3s. This opto design that Shadow Hills have is just great. And that's why a lot of people in electronic music like it. Let's try and destroy the mix with the opto compressor only, nothing else. Hear how nice this sounds. It holds like to me, it feels like a huge giant that is taking a massive hit, like a massive stone, and just doesn't move like an inch. It's fantastic. And I remember that we would often have fun and try and put the original unit through the worst. And this compressor, just it's a wall. It's incredible, and it has a way of handling lows that is just beautiful. I mean, obviously this is a lot. We perceive it that it is a lot, but it doesn't become grainy. It doesn't become gritty. The real unit has this. It's such a watery kind of sound. Now, I've tried these extreme settings on other emulations in the digital world. I'll let you find out what else is available. They kind of get grainy a little bit. So to me, I remember the original unit that we had was so Titanic in a way that wouldn't happen. This sounds to me more what we had, and I'm pulling 15 dBs of gain. In this case, in this plugin, they're quite clean. On the unit, you would also have a little bit more of color. Let's try and keep it punished this much. Let's try do a gain match comparison first, and then we're gonna move from look ahead 0 to 4, and we're gonna compare. But first, let me gain match. All right, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna go 3, 4 up. Let's make it 3 up. So I bumped a little bit the waveform just to get the mix to be a bit hotter. We're just cheating. Let's now do again a gain match. I mean, in this room, I can hear the sub so well with this compressor especially on, even with the sidechain filter off. So remember, there's no sidechain going on. This is just the opto compressor taking in the whole track, and trust me, you can see that on the spectrum meter, there's quite a lot of lows. Mono sub, I mean, the mix is nice and well done, but there's no fear in this compressor. The sub gets handled in a way that it's just fantastic. Now I'm gonna move from 0 to 4, the look ahead, and we're gonna get to know what happens with that parameter. Listen to what happens right after the hit of the kick, like a little bit before and a little bit after. You're gonna hear that 0 is maybe not that clean, I would say, but is way more stable in a way. Like when the hit comes, whatever happens, happens. In 4, you can tell that the compressor has prepared for it, and there's a little bit of a dip. You might like that, you might not like that, but it's important that you know that this happens. So once again. Have you noticed when the bass plays at the very end now of the passage, we get back to 12 dBs of compression. Nothing is really happening. So I like 0, honestly. I would maybe, if I wanted to make it a super unit out of like a super perfect analog circuitry, would probably head to 1, but I kind of like having no look ahead at all. So it's just more Shadow Hills as I remember. Now, Why would you go 12 dB of compression on something like this? I don't know, to ruin a mix, probably, or because you like the sound. Maybe it's a drum bass, maybe, you know, whatever. Maybe you like it, everybody likes it. There's no sin in that, there's no shame. What happens, however, is that this compressor, to me, the original unit, is just fantastic for rising the dynamic range to the limit, so bringing up the lower material so well. And this, I have to say, is one of the best compressors for this task. What you can do is, let's go where the music is, you see here in the waveform, at around here, this 220 mark, there's a lot of dynamics. Like, we're going very piano, I would say, and we're slowly building things up. Now, without this compressor, we're gonna have quite a jump. But with these settings engaged, you're gonna hear that the quiet parts are now extremely loud. And so, for the old loudness days, for people who really need an edge, not necessarily to make music loud in absolute terms, but to keep the low dynamics very hard and competitive, for music that gets listened a lot to low volume and stuff, the Shadow Hills should never be underestimated. And unfortunately, to me, it's a task that a lot of people are not quite aware that it can do. And that's mostly because of how clean the opto stage is. So especially in music that has fewer mid frequencies like this, with a lot of extremes, so electronic music and stuff, it's very hard to feel that it's there. And I would say the SSL sort of style compressor will not take you to this punch. It has a different punch. It's beautiful, but it's different. So now let's keep these in and let's hear how the music translates with the compressor from the louder drop into the middle eight. This is also great middle eight with like more of acoustic instruments. Have you noticed that the music is gain matched without and with the compressor in the choruses? So if I bypass the compressor and it's a chorus, the loudness level is the same. It sounds different, obviously, because we're hitting 12 dBs of compression sometimes, but have you noticed that if you want it this heavy, you can go look ahead 3 already, and it's very transparent. Very transparent. But when I disengage the compressor on the middle eight, which is the quietest part of the tune, the level drops incredibly. So if you were to listen to this at a very low volume, like alarm clock level or something, you would miss the middle eight. So obviously it doesn't have to be this extreme, but you can see the benefit of some gentle opto compression on the mix bus. And if you're getting too many lows, that you don't like them that much, and you're still in a mixing stage, you can prevent that or compensate afterwards with an equalizer. That's why it's called Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor, but it should be Shadow Hills Mixing Compressor or Shadow Hills Tracking Compressor. It's actually maybe even more valuable than in a mastering situation, because sometimes you already use a lot of analog stuff. In mastering, it quite never felt right to me. And again, there's people that use it and made multi-platinum records, so to help to what I say, you know, right? It doesn't matter, right? But the tracking capabilities with vocals, for example, or bass, or even keyboards, and the mixing phase of putting this and EQ there, they're gonna leave you speechless by how the mix just stays very solid, you know, and still feels dynamic without having that drop. So, big feature of the look ahead, and the opto. If you try this much on another plugin, as I said, you're gonna get a very different sound. Maybe you like it better on another emulation of the Shadow Hills. To me, this was how the original unit behaved. To make it, pardon the term, crap out was very hard, just because of how the analog worked. It could take a massive hit. Now let's try the discrete. So we're gonna, turn everything off in Optoland and we're gonna go discrete land. Here, there's a lot more parameters, but follow me, we're gonna learn how this works and sounds. After this, we're gonna put it all together and I'm gonna show you how I do it because it's so unique that no, really, I don't know if other people use it this way, but there's different ways that I like to use this if I'm forced to use it. So first and foremost, let's try one of the sort of in-between ratios, like a 2:1. How I would set it is this. I would listen to the tune with quite a lot of compression and do the old school way of fine-tuning attack and recovery to the mood of the song. Let's do these first. It actually sounded fine at the beginning, I gotta say. Right? So it hits very hard, but it gives us an idea of how it works. Now I'm gonna lower the threshold and we're gonna try and get around 4. Right? Let's see. Because this one I don't like to hit very hard. The other one in electronic music works wonders, but with the smaller ratios, I don't like to hit very hard. Right? Now, what I would do is I would try and ease the attack or lower the ratio, right? Right? So this for electronic music is just great as a sort of a shorter setting, something that I wouldn't necessarily use, but you can feel how that works. Now, I'm gonna keep using this because I know some people here are gonna say like, well, this is electronic music, you should use it in a rock environment. We're gonna use that in a rock environment. We have another track that is fully rock and we're gonna try and use it that way. But the easiest way to understand this compressor is, for better or worse, with something that hits this hard with no mids. Because if you try and venture with this compressor on a rock tune, you're gonna have a bad time. So trust me on this one, let's keep focusing on this. Let me get back on chat here, right? And all right, so this is a 2:1. So what happens if you go lower? Nice. This kind of sounds kind of nice. And now we're in the mood of kissing the meter, right? Just getting that little bit of compression, just for color. Voila, These I like. 1.2 something, smaller, longer attack, kind of a medium recovery, pretty long, right? If you were to use it on something like an SSL, you probably would like to go be real fast. And that's exactly like Gark said, like it would be nice to hear the various preamps as well. Exactly. Now that we have some mood going on with the discrete, I will go and dial in just the opto a tiny little bit to show you how the interaction between the two really makes the whole thing sing. And I gotta say, this is close to what the unit had, but if there's one thing that the real unit can do to a magic point, and it's probably because of current flow and stuff, it's because it's electricity driven. There's a lot of, I don't know, magnetism, whatever. But this gets very close. So now I would engage opto, get the threshold to just be right on the view meter, and once we have that, we're gonna cycle the preamps. So when you match these two compressor sides and they kind of work together the way that is not ruining a mix, when I was making fun of myself, like you're gonna ruin mixes, it feels like the song is actually a bit more dynamic than it was before. Like it becomes less boring than it was before. When you bypass this compressor, it feels flatter in a way. So usually once I have this set up, I'm gonna give you away all my tricks beforehand, that's when I like to cycle the preamps. And now we're gonna do it, I'm gonna shut up, we're gonna go P1A, bronze, silver, gold, LGV, slowly, then I'm gonna go back to off, and we're gonna cycle them a couple times while the song goes. I think I'm gonna reach out to at least the middle 8 as well, because I just want to hear it. What I'm gonna do also is I'm gonna pump the output a tiny little bit, because we're not gonna gain bypass or gain match, so we don't need to go in bypass, so we have a beefier kind of tone. To make it justice, let's try LGV on the final part. This was, I was gonna do it. Great, Gark, that you suggested that, because you reinforced, like I was this close to getting to the preamps, because in this plugin, I like to set up, honest to God, the preamps last. I don't always do that. But I think that once you've dialed in the compressor right, the preamp, which is actually at the beginning of the chain for the signal processing of this engine, as far as I've read in the manual, is actually something I want to try last. And my impressions are as follows. Captain's log, we tried the preamps. All right, so preamp off is preamp off. It sounded fine. If we didn't have the preamps, we would still say, wow, the compressor is great. You see how we have no compression on the lowest parts, and we get just a tiny bit of movement with the transients. I think it respects the tune, makes it a little bit more moving and less static, and it feels great. You engage P1A, and I feel that I'm kind of tilting towards the cloudier low mids and lows typical of a Pultec. Not exactly what I would like in this tune, but you can tell that there's a depth maybe in the low bottom part, and there's kind of a gentler, I wouldn't say scoop of the lows, but it feels a bit more protected, right? So that's true. And Garg says, a good point, I tend to do preamp first. I also do. In a lot of plugins, I actually set preamp first, and sometimes when I do more tracks, I just don't care about differentiating. Like if I emulate an SSL and I like that kind of preamp, or on Gold or a Neve and stuff, I only take maybe the lead vocal and experiment with a different pre. The rest, I think like, okay, this is my console, this is what I have. Keep going, because I don't have all the time in the world. Clients are gonna call and you don't wanna be caught unprepared. On this plugin, however, I like to do it last. Honestly, like really, it makes sense to give it that final shape, even if it's something that affects the signal from the get-go. So this is P1A. Bronze is typical of the first settings of the Shadow Hills. It has some depth from the P1A. It's a little bit more modern, however, and it doesn't have that scooped feeling of the low mids without having that much depth. It's a bit flatter in a good way, I would say, but it's a little bit soft. And this for very harsh music or for very singer-songwritery, I find it very, very good. This one I wouldn't quite like. Silver is usually the match is against silver and gold on stuff that is electronic to me, because gold has, as we said, exactly, like it has a bloom factor that expands on the three-dimensional effect of the song, I think. The high to low mids, especially the mid-mids, that's a very technical term, the mid-mids are enhanced in a way. It feels like there's a little bit of that side channel equalization in a way, which I think doesn't happen, but it feels more three-dimensional without moving the centerpieces of extreme lows and extreme highs, but it just has a roundness to it, which I really like, and the speakers interact together. I hear more left to right interaction. Silver is less of this, but it feels hard, and it has that strong opinion on the high mids that I really, really like. And here it would be a match between silver and gold. Somehow I think gold would win, but just because it takes you in the music, when the organic elements like acoustic instruments come in, they feel more into a space, which this genre, I know the artists, they would have probably loved gold more, but if you were to go straight on a rock tune where you have more of a foos kind of, top 40 rock with the, stage and lots of people in front of you, harder kind of mid frequencies, guitars and stuff. I personally love silver, and I've tracked through a lot of Shadow Hills stuff that has the silver equivalent preamp choice. I gotta say, it feels like compression and EQ right off the bat, like the monogammas or stuff that have these. They're beautiful preamps, so it shouldn't be disregarded. Now, what do we want to try? We should try filter, because we should. But what I want to try as well, let's try the filter first, which is going to completely offset our compression, because the 90 Hertz filter is going to just take things away from our thresholds. So we're going to rebalance with the same settings. And Then I'm gonna show you the flood, which is a setting that nobody uses because it's like, oh, you don't use that in mastering? Trust me, this is insane. Then we're gonna move to a rock tune, use everything we've learned to master that tune that you've heard at the beginning. So let's try the filter and see where it takes us. This is another, take note, this is another fantastic way of mixing through this processor. Again, it used to be one of the first things we would do when I had the original unit there. I often just always had the filter engaged. And now thinking back to it, it's not a unit that needs the filter on because you've heard how much it can do on the spectrum. So it was more me being cautious about it and try to not get that much compression and less and less and less. And obviously the high pass helps, you know, avoiding that hits in those hits in the lows. But this now feels cleaner. I mean the mix feels cleaner, not the compressor. The mix feels cleaner in a sense that I can hear high frequencies better. The mid-mids, which is now the term of today, has more, they have more, they're less boring. Can I say that? They're less boring, they're less digital, they're less static. And sometimes I say that I can hear the DAW less. I have less the feeling of these being Ableton Live. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. You know, when you get a lot of tunes from students and people, sort of even artists and stuff, sometimes I say that I can hear the DAW, which doesn't mean I can hear the DAW. What does it? You cannot hear the DAW. But it means that the processing, the stock plugins, the delays, the grain delays, the stuff that everybody uses because of tutorials and stuff, kind of leave a footprint. And you end up sounding like everybody else. And when you hear nice records, they have that life to it. I have to say that this feels more as if you finally broke loose of the digital DAW and you put it into an analog piece of gear. So it is more gentle, yeah, and mastering friendly for sure. What I also like is that if you stay this quiet on the meters, the lows, which are not getting compressed because of the filter, are not becoming prominent. So you're not getting sometimes some SSL compressors that have added side chains. I don't particularly like side chains on SSLs, for example, for this reason, tend to make the lows insane, you know? And these a lot of people in electronic music, they actually like that, what happens on the end, dualities and stuff. I don't quite like that. Because it just completely throws everything apart. And if you're mastering, right, it's right there. Here, exactly, like it emphasizes what are already smoothed out electronic sounds. Exactly, I agree with that. It just gives it that higher quality timbre to the synths, right? So again, it is on par with what I liked from the original unit. Look ahead at 0 this time, because sometimes I noticed that the meters were bumping off at 4, like the compressor was overreacting, like it was afraid not to make it in time for the transient, too much. So 0, look ahead, very quiet, something like this. Schmott we haven't touched. Now, last but not least, I'm gonna try the flood, because there's no way we're gonna try all the settings, but with what we've learned, this is gold. So let's get rid of the opto and let's try something a lot of people don't quite use that much. So let's flood this whole thing. I'm gonna turn the preamp off, and then ultimately we're gonna use the preamp and just see how much of a difference this makes. But this is not about preamp now, it's more about this behavior that the compressor has, which is quite particular. So again, chorus. Actually, let's take this part, the final part here. You heard it, right? I'm hearing in my head, you're saying like, yeah, we heard it. Have you heard it? When I moved the recovery with the open attack, something happened, like three-dimensional kind of stuff. Yes, some synths came in, the claps came in, so obviously it's an arrangement part as well, but it's like it's like when the client says like, whoa, 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 stop. Like, what did you just do? This is awesome, just don't touch it. That's the one, don't touch it moment. So this is actually kind of cool. I'm gonna try and push some volume up and let you hear what I mean by that. This thing is pushing almost 8 dBs of compression, and people say like, oh, it's like the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor is one of the most colored compressors you can ever find. I don't think so. I think it's capable of knowing when to walk on, you know, on glasses and when not to. When I like flood, I usually on the real unit went super slow attack just to compensate the 20-1. And it's all about finding the right recovery. What I would do now, however, is move the SH mod, because with flood, in terms of how I remember the unit, I find that 2.5 sounds a little bit more what I used to remember, because it's by all means not flood. It sounds very horrible to use that, like don't use it for mastering. It's not true. It's a very musical thing, but it's acting a bit too fast, in my opinion, for being 30. So let's compare 2 with 2.5, 3 at most, but I think 2.5 is my memory. Again, you know, I should have the unit here. We could spend hours and still find differences. So it felt a bit sudden a little bit. So I'm easing the attack out from 2 to 2.5. Like the claps are so round now, so wide. If you tell somebody on paper you've done 20-1 with 4 to 8 dBs of compression, they're gonna say like, I don't wanna buy this master, you know, redo it. On paper, it looks horrible. We don't care. I think if I move to gold now, it's maybe, I have a feeling that silver might be the ticket just because of how much of a bloom we're getting out of this flood setting. So, but trust me, like this 2.5, you heard the difference. It feels a bit more, even more invisible, which was the feeling I had the first time I tried. Like, wow, this is not horrible, especially with the filter on. Last but not least, we're gonna disengage the filter. At that point, we might have to go way, way easier, but insane. So let's try silver versus gold. I don't know. I don't know. Gold might still be super good. Silver, however, is less of a move, I would say. So now we're not making too big jumps because we might end up over, you know, and in the water, in the lava, actually. So silver feels like, okay, we've done so much with flood that if I had to engage a preamp, there's plenty color from the compression, honestly. So I would keep silver, but it is weird, right? Yeah, I'm reading the chat. It is. It is. It's just like, in a way, it makes no sense, but it does. And the unit is so unique that I think it's a design thing. Because of how Acustica works, that they just sort of like sample the behavior without being too inquisitive about everything, just making sure the unit is on spec, but respecting the unit as something in which a lot of things happen rather than going, you know, all component by component. I think this helps the snapshot of what we're getting here. And in analog, you do have those moments when you try it and it's like, oh, wow, like, how can this happen? You know, we're even converting, so losing in theory, we're losing quality from the D to A, then A to D. And that happens oftentimes with beautiful analog units. That's the case. That's why people still have them, you know, around here. So, but this is a plugin if you think about it. So very musical, very cool, very respectful. I'm gonna keep silver, turn the filter off, and then resize the compressor. A lot more of a wild horse now, right? Because of how much sub we're getting. So in a mastering situation, I would probably go filter on, and that's what I remember from Flood. The Schmod thing helped, however. Another thing that could help could be engaging the opto to prevent getting these many hits. So we're getting, I mean, doesn't sound bad, but what we heard first is like that. I want that. I would still want what I've done. Now here we're playing with a lot of stuff. I mean, we're doing opto compression plus 20 to 1. Why should it sound fine? And that's what I meant with, I can ruin a lot of mixes if you give this to me, you know, and I go wild on it. So if you have a syndrome of, that's your new toy syndrome, be very careful. And that's why I thought about doing this stream, because these ways of working out, of knowing the compressor and stuff, they're gonna help you avoiding that I have this new thing, especially the analog. I mean, remember when, you know, you have this huge mastering compressor, you gotta use it every time. You gotta use it more. You're really gonna end up ruining mixes. But all of these ways that I've shown you are actually, you know, that. And exactly, yeah, there are even the ivory stuff, yeah, that we covered in past streams. They have that moment in which, you know, things click, and that happened with filter. I think gold or silver, it's fine, but mostly this setting here. Flat on discrete, 2.5, little bit of compression that sometimes end up being a bit more, 0.4. I would say recovery, there's no way of knowing. Silver preset, blah, 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 100%. I don't like to use the mix in parallel, but I've tried and it works. There's a phase coherent behavior, and that's okay. So now, armed with this fantastic knowledge, which is, I wanted to say that from the start, we're gonna try and master, I wouldn't say that's, that's probably too bad. This rock song with what we've learned and find different ways. So we need kind of the chorus here just to make things better. Let's try and hear if that works. No compression at all. Yeah, I think this is fine. Let's reset everything and let's play it out the right way. So volume wise, we're fine. What I'm gonna do is what we had here. So the first thing is the EQ, because it just sounded much better and we had to. Now you're gonna hear what I meant, that with rock music, this thing it's another beast. So electronic music turns it into easy mode, but with rock tunes and guitars, you gotta play it safe somehow. Maybe that's not gonna be the case, but I kind of already know that. So let's try just some things I would do. I would probably try the discrete first. That's how I work around this unit when I have no idea what I want to do and when there's no tone shaping oriented stuff. I want to have a powerful mix bus, try and get it to sound like that. So what I'm gonna do is try the super dangerous 6-1, because it's usually too much for a lot of reasons, but let's try this. All right, now I'm gonna lower the threshold. Boom. Now you will never, trust me, I really like this setting, so I hope you're liking it as well. I have not tried these ever. I opened this song today for the first time after 7 years. And when I opened this, I was like, wow, this is dark. And then I noticed in the notes that there was a print to tape. And I think we went kind of dark on the bias and something, but that's how we ended up. Then it was getting mastered. So it was an in the process thing. So the EQ, we're gonna keep that way. I don't wanna change, but the compressor, I wanted the 6-1 because I remember when we used it on these units on rock, I really, really like this. If you had Chandlers, if you had 33 609s, I don't particularly like the 6-1, but there's a Neve kind of quality to this, and to me it speaks to a lot of late 90s and early 90s as well rock music, like from stoner to grunge a little bit, what the Foo Fighters started to make, some of the Rage Against the Machine stuff. It gets that crowded, right? It sounds like I can almost see the audience just dancing and moving around and stuff. It gets to a more lively setting. Could be one thing that we like about it. We're losing some highs, so maybe one wants to compensate, but this is a very nice setting. 6-1 should not be underestimated. So this could be it. I could keep it, maybe fine tune it a bit. Silver is rock music in Shadow Hills land. I still think that's it. Can the opto make things better? I would try it at this point. So 0 look ahead. Let's try and see if we get just a smidgen of compression. It works. Silver 6-1, How many times have you used 6-to-1 compression on a master? I'll leave this question to you. I don't know. I don't usually use it on a lot of mixes, but and this was already mix bus compressed. I remember exactly, I've used my 2500. This was our mix bus compressor that I mixed the whole thing into. So, you know, there's already bus compression, but I think this highlights things even more without being too constipated. That could be the term. Now, from here, what I wanted to do, I completely forgot. I think the look ahead at 0 works. I think this works as well. We could, actually, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna copy this to another instance. We're gonna rename this to 6-to-1, just so we don't forget. And we're gonna use this other instance of AQUAMARINE4 to dial in another setting. And then we can sort of like have fun testing the two. Now, listen to how the lower part is no longer that low. So, exactly, you can safely say never. I almost, very seldom used it. But if you have Chandler's LTD2s, the compressors, they are fixed 6-to-1. So they're beautiful compressors. I had a pair for around a couple years or a year and a half. They're fantastic. They are fixed 6-to-1. Some people mod them, but the 6-to-1 seems to be a limitation. However, when you use those units, you really learn that you can do a lot because they have extremely fast attacks and slow attacks and extremely long releases. So you can make things float around and the needle just moves, and that's where I learned the 6-to-1 thing is not that bad. It's actually very reminiscent again of Neve, but you can fiddle with attack and recovery to make that ratio not a problem at all. So this is the same thing. So it happens to be that. Now, when we end this chorus, we go, you see the waveform, to a kind of a quieter part, right? So let's hear, once we get there, when I bypass the compressor, how much of a drop we have. Because this would be a rock tune, so we don't, you know, we wouldn't want things to be too dynamic, right? So we're not getting any gain change in the choruses when I bypass, but I'm curious to see how much we're gonna change from the low parts, because in terms of gain compensation, I have maybe 1 dB dialed in, but it feels thicker and busier and more detailed in a way, right? So let's try this. It works. And I think you're laughing at looking at my webcam when I'm going like this, when I don't want to interrupt the music, but just like, it's an eureka moment. Now, the transition, something super important. I think this band came to me because of what I had done in stoner rock music, and they really loved the mixes they have heard. I hope that was the case. But that transition when the guitars go high pitch, it's super important in their genre and in a lot of genres. So I'm curious to hear what happens without and with. Let's compare these. It is louder. There's actually more difference between the low and highs. It's kind of hard to describe. There's a thickness to the louder part that makes the thing more dynamic. Better sound stage as well, I agreed. Hands in the air is what it's all about. It's true. I'm like, I cannot talk. I don't want to talk over the music, but it's just like, you know, I talk with my hands, obviously. You know, that's genetically engineered within me. So 621 people, beautiful. Now let's try something else. Let's try the flood here again. But I would still point everything on discrete because it's a rock tune. That's how I do it. And that's how you're gonna live with it. We're gonna keep silver, we're not moving from there, but I'm gonna try flood and hear how this works. Then we're gonna try a super subtle 1.2, and then we're gonna compare, then we're gonna say goodbye, barbecue, blah, blah, blah. Even more, still not bad, but remember Schmod 2.5. To me, that's the ticket for flood. But it's still good, but I think it's gonna be better with that. Now the transition, like everybody wants to hear the transition. How about 6.1? Wow. Flood it's kind of a cool trick. And if you move Schmod, now it's gonna be Schmod forever. Attack and recovery do not need to move that much, right? But 6.1 has opto on and flood does not. So would I use flood as well? Not sure. Would I use opto on flood? Let's try this. Personal opinion, flood, I would ditch the opto, but 6-1, I would still keep it. Who's gonna win? I really don't know. Hello, Pablo. Hello. Welcome. So let's call this flood. The magic factor is still there in both, but I'm not sure what I would use. Now, third, how we're gonna end it up. Cannot get any geekier than these, people. It's just like, but that's, I mean, why would you do all this if you weren't to be this thorough, right? And we're still being coherent to like, what's our final purpose? Make the music translate better. Boom, that's it. We're not going, with oscilloscopes and stuff, which is super interesting, but it's not what we're after here. Now, discrete again, it's gonna be always there in rock, kind of the opposite if I were to do electronic. As I said, 1.2, why not? Let's hear these at maximum. Again, quote, "Oh, the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor is a super colored compressor." Is it? Is it? Or is it? Honestly, it's pulling 8 dBs and it's kind of there. Now, how was the original unit? Because, we're still analyzing a plugin. I don't remember it particularly colored because of the compressor stages. I remember the punch from the opto, which we tested, and I remember the thickness factor or the excitement factor in a very elegant way from the discrete once dialed in, and I remember the shades of colors from the preamps. But there's way more colored processors, in my opinion, which is a good thing for this. And it floats great. And this 1.2, I mean, we're doing 8 to 1. So I can only imagine the lower part, how loud it would be. Tiger faces and because that's what you also have to remember. Utility factor. We're getting 8 dBs of compression and then 4 in the smaller parts. So we've got a 4 dBs difference just there. But you notice attack and recovery, once they work and you dial them right, I'm not gonna change them that much. We're doing ratio threshold. It's already a lot. Why would we change attack? You know, we would hear it at this much compression. We would hear it if the attack and release would be wrong. But I think they're maybe our safest anchor to the musicality of the compressor on the tune. So those I would not fiddle with. We could try and go the opposite way, like I mean, this is still a lot of compression. So let's first ease it out. Have you heard the transition between the lowest part? It feels like we're cranking volume when we bypass it, and it's at unity gain in the choruses. So it's just like, yes, it brings the kick bit out more. Some people might like it. I don't know. I want to hear the transition here. It works anyway, and we're pulling the typical 4, right? We could go even quieter, and I'm gonna copy this because I think this is kind of a good comparison for it. This, of all the options, which would be the safer one when you don't want to screw it up, it actually is screwing it up more. So the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor has this halo of, it's like a test, it's a trial. If you play it safe, you know, it's going to destroy you, but it awards audacity in a way. I think this compressor, it's a cool thing to think about, like, you know, if it is it's a trial of the compressor. So if it feels that you're afraid and you're kind of holding off to your intention to be part of the engineering of this tune, it's gonna punish you in giving you something that works but meh, you know? This one becomes a little bit too mellow and mushy. So I liked it better when we decisive 4 to 1 at least. But the others that we tried, Flood and then a little bit of Opto, they actually, you know, award you of saying like, all right, you've been audacious enough to go for it, here's your sound. So yes, could be a filtering gauge as well. Let's try this. Let's try it right, that's good. Definitely filter, absolutely. This makes the highs shine again, although the 4GR wasn't that bad at 1.2 ratio. What I liked the least was very gentle gain reduction on 1.2. It almost becomes like, why are you even doing this? You know, like the compressor's gonna say like, why are you even turning me on? You know, I can do so much and you're just making me move the needle, which worked in Electronica, for example, in the other case. With filter, we're getting that edge. I like the guitars better. The lower registry is still at pace. It doesn't make everything move, but the guitars have more edge. The snare finds itself a bit more room. funny how many things happen, right? And we're just compressing the signal, but it is changing the sound quite a lot. So without. It is insane. What we would used to do on the original unit was we would sometimes try and even track, for example, vocals through it and have opto and threshold. Sometimes we would try and unlink things from left to right and just process two channels independently and then listen back to it. But there's a balance in how it was built that is kind of reflected here. So I kind of gotta say that let's keep it that way. Let's try and engage opto on this setting with the filter though, because that's where it plays better, and just keep it a little bit more like no, kissing the needle again. Sounds cool. Would I do it? Maybe even a bit less, probably. And the last thing I would try, but I copied these settings, I think the opto helps. The whole opto helps that interaction, revelation of the day. Yeah, that's true, it's true. It has that thing, that's why they designed it that way. That they took inspiration from, I talked with the people at Shadow Hills, like, they said like it looks complicated, but we've been doing that for years when you had LA2A 1176. So the 1176 is a FET compressor, it's not a VCA, but you have these sort of like hold on to the peaks first and make sure there's nothing violent that gets to the 1176. And once you get to the 76, then you have the milder, more all over the place compressor. So you compress less but more violently on the opto, and then you compress more but less violently on, more often but less quantity on the 76. Elton John's done it, Michael Jackson's done it. I mean, it's, you name it, Peter Gabriel, I think, you know, it's a typical thing to do. I do it with limiters from brick walls and stuff, usually even. I don't even use optos anymore. I just shave off the extreme transients. I think I did it in this song, absolutely. Like the vocals here have a L1, I think, almost at the first stage, just to get rid of the extremes sometimes, and then everything else starts. So it isn't that new and innovative, which is a good thing. It's a method that's been used quite a lot. So now we're gonna compare 6:1 against flood against 1.2. I wanna hear if there's any difference in volume before we do this. But to do it professionally, we're gonna duplicate and we're gonna turn on each one of these here. Let's try a normal duplicate without, I don't need the other, oh, okay, what have I done? Right, probably that, all right. Then we're gonna get rid of flood here, although it doesn't really matter because when they are in bypass, they're deallocated from our thing. So 6:1, flood 1.3. We're gonna make these sort of like, I don't know, green. Doesn't really make sense. Go on, maybe bluish because it's Neve. The flood maybe grayer, and the 1.2 reminds me of what? Of Mazalek-ish kind of thing. It's a lighter gray. This is impossible to name, so no, it's not gonna work. Green, yellow, red, right? Actually, that's so bright. Purple. All right, so let's do this. Let's hear if there's any difference in gain first. This dude is louder. Go here. That's insane already, right? All right, officially, let's try it out. So why am I doing this? Because if I switch tracks, we're not gonna hear any clicks, pops, and whatever, right? We're gonna go boom, boom, boom. So we're gonna go purple, yellow, green, yellow, purple, yellow, green, back and forth. One is a 6-to-1. I'm actually gonna keep them all here for you, if I have the room, because they're pretty big plugins. And this is the other one. All right, hold on, because I don't have them pinned here. Do we have room for a spectrum analyzer? Poor guy. Yes. All right, here's our 3 Shadow Hills Mastering Compressors in the form of AQUAMARINE4. Let's try this. Wow, wow. First and foremost, yes, I was reading the chat and was laughing about it without stopping. Like, yeah, they got no screws, so this is super heavy. You don't want them to fall off on your keyboard and your hands. Quite sharp metal, you know. And I remember it was super, super heavy. Like it's a force to be reckoned with when you enter a studio because it's got a Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor. You're gonna go like, oh no. Like, you know, if you have a trigger happy engineer that just acquired that, you're in for a bad mix. But you know, it's unless signal just passes through. But with what we've learned, at least that's my way of approaching this, it sounds great. So counterclockwise if it's an electronic tune, clockwise if it's a rock tune. As simple as that. Obviously, there's no rule. You know, I know that, and nothing is written in stone. But generally, that's how I like to do it. Now, for rock music, this is hard mode for this compressor, but once you nail it, it works. So flood is incredibly strong on the choruses, probably the best. Like when the chorus hits, the amount of density and energy leaves no person behind. It's just insane. However, it tends to be a little bit soft and less defined in the highs. So if you had a mastering EQ before or after, I would compensate for it a bit. The 1.2 to 1 is incredibly detailed. Maybe the most open soundstage the one that would probably appeal to more people, and there's a sparkle quality to it that is very, very nice, just probably because of the filter and how gentle we're doing and stuff. The 621 is very hard to explain because it does something that the other two don't do. It's sometimes a bit dark as the flood, and it's sometimes not too dark, so it tends to be brighter, and it vibes nicely in a way, maybe more consistently towards the whole song, you know, with highs and lows. So you're saying like, you said like, could it be that one of them, the snare, would come more towards the front? I would say they all kind of treat the snare differently. Maybe the ones that's probably easier, especially on smaller speakers, would be the green, which is the 1.2 to 1. It feels to me as if the snare is capable of piercing better through. There's also more energy in the guitars. My experience tells me that if you had to throw a ball at the band with just one of the three, probably 1.2 to 1 would be the one that gets the most band members to agree with. Because at the end, maybe that quality of perceived highs and sparkle is perceived as much, it's a bit more energy, volume, whatever. But they feel pretty balanced to me in the choruses, obviously, because when we drop to the lowest parts, then all bets are off. They all feel a bit different because of how they compress. That's natural. They're not, you can't gain compensate a mastering compressor on every part of the song, because the moment the needle drops, your output gain is now fully, you know, overcompensating. And once you're compressing at the most, that's when your output gain is doing what it wants. So I like all three, you know. I will watch the video again because this will be recorded anyway for you people from the future, and I'll take my own decisions. But there's a lot of details definitely to be listened there. I kept a cool, good chunk of music to be played, and they're all viable. They're all viable. Maybe the flood is capable of denying some of the extreme highs, because remember, we're all going through these EQ here. So we're pumping up the highs quite a lot. And the flood seems to be a darker kind of vibe. So that darker vibe could be useful if we have a brighter environment, for example, where a hi-hat or cymbals or stuff are coming up too much. But I really like how this mastering compressor is helping the kick remain what it is. Because when we track this song, I'm speaking from a recording engineer standpoint, because I recorded, mixed, and mastered this song. I wasn't supposed to master the album. Then months after, the band calls me, New Year, and they say like, we talked about it, we had some masters going on, we didn't like them. We have a drummer who's plenty capable, as a great sound engineer, but he doesn't have time to do it, so you do it. And so months after, I also mastered the record. But what we did when we tracked it, we liked our kick drum to have no hole, and we mic'd this kick drum with only a D12 and a U87 far, a little bit like a mid-room, and oh, thanks, appreciate it. They were super happy. The label, I brushed my silvers for months with this band, because they won in France a contest, and then they came to Berlin to track, mix, and master. And I was very happy, because when I heard the music, I said like, this is what I do. Like when I mix, I like to mix rock music. I've done my most stuff with a lot of electronic, but I gotta say rock is still what I've done and learned from, you know, real people in LA and stuff. So it comes a bit more natural to me. I've also played a lot of keys in rock bands and stuff, so that's probably helping. But we had this kick drum with no hole. And I remember, let me switch to this fantastic environment of mushroom-like experience. We had these kick drum with the calf tone skin, no hole, 1D12. And we didn't want the kick, that was a very strong decision from the start. We didn't want the drums to have this clicky, modern behavior. We wanted the kick to be felt equally as much as heard in terms of point. We didn't want typical click sampley kind of stuff. There's no samples on this record whatsoever. It's just natural drum sound and the drummer playing very nicely on tempo and just laying down beats right and strong, you know, when they need to be. But the fact that we only had one skin with no hole made the kick this particularly balanced. And you wouldn't believe there's not a lot of plugins on the insert on the kick. There's actually a lot of parallel things going on in the mix, but not that many. The Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor, AQUAMARINE4, I should say, is plenty capable of respecting that. It's not obliterating the kick to a cloud of stuff, which a lot of transformer-based stuff, you know, very analog things tend to do. Sometimes it's actually, if anything, it's making it more detailed in a way, especially with the filter. So I have a D12. You can use a D6 as well, yeah. The original one, you know, like the very old, it's great for vocals, a bit noisy, but fantastic mic. One of my favorites by all means. I think it's the first that was ever made in the dynamic world. You know, I don't remember. I think it's one of the first dynamic mics, AKG D12, yes. But yeah, I mean, beautiful. So that's also another part. I think the snare becomes crispier and it's nice what it's doing, but the most important part is that the low registry of the kick, bass and low guitars is not becoming clouded. Because if it does, then it's on the verge of being hard to grasp. And we didn't want to fall, obviously, in that part. If you think about it, we're not doing mid-side, we're not doing nothing. We're doing one EQ, one compressor. So, as usual, I'm gonna go back to these settings so you see what I've done here. Yes, we liked all three. You'll be able to go back and forth to then decide what was better. But that's it. So we would probably have to do this, right? Like let's take the 1 to 1.2, which was the one that would maybe appeal to the masses a bit more. Let's listen to this, just a tiny part, final chorus, without both of them and then with. If we have a gain change, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to compensate the yellow one. That's gonna be fun because I don't want to switch with noise and stuff. So fully gain compensated comparison. Let's try this first. All right, got it? Let's do it. Green is processed, yellow is natural. It's still there. Once we lose the gain, doesn't sound that different, right? But it's just helping de-cloud things, and it's those cases in which you think like, who would say I like it better without, right? And it goes to a great deal to explain that it's not a dangerous compressor. It's not a easy to overdo compressor. It actually awards you better if you take stronger decisions, in my opinion. So better translation, better transients. If you have a bright system, it's not gonna sound harsh. But if you have a darker system, or you have, I don't know, a room where you're listening to music far away and you like lower volumes, if you have Bose speakers, this is the ticket, because you cannot have it the other way where you get woolier and woolier and woolier, and then you have a lot of lows and very hard to understand transients, because, you know, Bose likes to play their own rules in sound. It's just not wrong. It's just a very, very famous brand that oftentimes you might want to, take into consideration. A lot of people love it, a lot of people hate it. So that's about it. I think I gave you a lot of information as usual. This video will be available for people from the future, and it was really great to cover these 2 plugins. This time it's 2 plugins. We stayed here the 2 hours that we needed for all of the other master classes because of how different the ways that I use the compressor are. And again, I don't have it anymore, but I remember once we have it for those 6 months, I developed these 6 flood 1.2, this approach that I showed you about the colors, which we would choose at the last moment. Here we have a head and schmod, which are not part of the unit, but I told you how you can use them to get to the feel that the real unit had. It's cheaper, for sure, than the original unit. It doesn't look as scary, but it has a beautiful name, and you can save and recall till the end of days, which is the beauty of digital, people. So thank you very much for following me. Yes, it's gonna be barbecue time. So now you're gonna have to bite back. Yes, I mean, you can use many other tools, but these certainly, to me, would work. If I was on a desert island and it would say like, sorry, you have to use the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor, I would say, worry not, I know how to use it. So, thank you very much, as usual, for being with me. Thanks for the support you're giving to my music. As usual, these live streams exist because you people are listening to Future in the Past, you're getting the floppy disks, you're liking it on Spotify. I appreciate any kind of support you want to do to this. I do it first and foremost to share this knowledge. I hope that if you one day use a different compressor, you find yourself with different style of music, whatever, you're gonna remember some of the things I said. Experiment, find your own way to do it, and beat my socks off and get better. And then hopefully send me a letter in which you say like, you know what, you did this, I tried this, in this case it worked even better, pass it on, I'll be listening, trying it out, learning, getting better. That's what we want to do. So it's always important to help the music reach the audience at its best. We don't want to intrude. We just want to help convey the message, right? I think that's important because songwriting is where it's at. So gotta be respectful to the people that want to tell a story first and foremost. So take a look at my album if you haven't done it already. There's a floppy disk version for sale as a limited edition on Bandcamp. And yes, it's a floppy freaking disk. And it works with MS-DOS, Amiga computers. Maybe you're too young for this, you don't even know these types of computers. But in the old days, when mankind was facing its first struggles with technology, we used weird devices like this. And, we even have colored ones now. So, thank you very much to Acustica for making this possible, to the group, to the people looking at any possibility of making new plugins. It's definitely fun. We can geek out. And yeah, floppy freaking disk. I didn't make cassette versions for the ZX Spectrum, sadly, this time, but don't tempt me on it because I'm writing more soundtracks and I might end up having the rights to distribute my own versions of the songs or the outtakes. And, that could happen. So, as usual, thank you very much for staying with me. It was great chatting with you, great, having people here. As usual, a lot of people are gonna watch this. Thanks for hitting 101 followers. I can't believe I'm doing all of this marketing crap because I hate it. What I'm here for is to geek out on music, but it's always fun. So, until next time, have a great Sunday. Have a great whatever day it is, the time you're gonna see this stream. And we're gonna see each other soon. You know where to reach me if you have questions of any sort. What else is left to do is there's only one button to press, which is the stream off. So you know where this is going, Thank you very much. See you next time. Ciao.